Well, good morning, Miriam. How are you?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm really, really good. And I want to say thank you so much for joining me and us on this platform. And I know there's a lot of people really excited to learn from you, to hear your story, and be inspired by everything that you've done. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for
Oh,
joining us.
thank you so much for having me. I'm honored, and it's so nice to hear that, as a person, you never feel that way about yourself all the time. So you're like, really? That's so cute. So nice. But thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. So I would love for you to just introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about your background, and then we can dive into some awesome questions.
Okay, so my name is Miriam Alden. I am the founder and creative director of Brunette The Label, as well as Brunette Showroom and the Babe List, which we kind of have a bit on hold right now, but it was a platform where we featured entrepreneurs. Brunette The Label is a clothing brand based out of Vancouver, and we're all about uplifting and empowering others. And Brunette Showroom was my very first baby, and it's a wholesale business that represents lots of amazing brands. I've kind of evolved it to mostly represent Canadian brands, mostly female founded brands. So all my businesses sort of have the same ethos, but all different. And Brunette the Label is kind of my main focus now. And that's why we're here and what we're talking about. So I started Brunette the Label in 2014, originally as a marketing tool for my showroom, which launched in 2009. Started with just making product that said brunette is the new black, because I launched Brunette Showroom. And when I named it, I didn't really have any big brands, and people knew me, but not a lot of like buyers from other markets. So I figured if they didn't remember my name, they would remember I was a tall girl with the dark brown hair. That's honestly where it came from. Um, and so, yeah, Brunette the Label was launched through that. And it's definitely like a values based business, all focused really on our values and how we choose to make people feel. That's really like our number one most important thing. And so, although I love fashion, that's really like my big passion is kind of like babe sporting babes, which we're going to get into, and just focusing on making everybody feel a part of something. So that's really the goal of Brunette the Label. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my businesses. I'm born and raised in Vancouver. I grew up, I still do it actually. When we are finished this, I'm going to be out in Langley riding my horses. So I grew up as a competitive show jumper, and it was something that I thought I was going to do for my whole life. And then when I realized it wasn't, I started going into business, but I still spend most of my spare time out at the barn training as an equestrian.
Amazing. I love it. That was everything in a very quick nutshell. That's great. And upon some of our conversations, I mean, like the the platform that you chose, you got some pushback. And how did you deal with that pushback? And what what did you do in order to just inspire you to create that visionary, you know, place that you once saw to continue on?
That's actually a really interesting story. I don't really exactly know. Sorry, that was my husband bringing me a juice. That was very nice. So I don't really know exactly how I did that, because that when I first started my business, I was really unsure of exactly the direction I was going to go in. I always knew I was very growth driven, and I was always very relationship driven. So those were things that really are my like core values, and something that I am very like firm with still today. So it was interesting. About year 10, I went back and sort of looked at the original plan of my business. And although I'm kind of in a different place than I thought I was and expecting to be, really the values of the company have always been the same. And I think that that's the way I sort of managed to overcome the challenges and the pushback. When I first started my business, let me tell you, nobody was using the word babe in a way that was not about a physical appearance. So we had a lot of pushback on that. Surprisingly, I didn't have a great experience with I had two experiences. I had a lot of support, tons of support from my friends and colleagues. Certainly, it was hard to break into the industry as somebody who really wasn't expected to. I don't come from a fashion family. I don't come from a background where, I had a lot of money to invest. I really started my business with absolutely nothing. And so people were like less than kind in some ways. And it's interesting. I actually am learning more about it as I've grown, hearing stories that obviously people didn't share with me back then. But I think what kept me going is that it was always really authentic for me. I always really personally believed in it. And I had a very amazing, my family and my really dear friends all supported. And I think that's something really important to do when people are starting a new business. I'm sure you understand that feeling. It's like,
For sure.
almost not one of my friends have ever missed one of, maybe now that we do more events, but kind of the first like 10 years, all my best girlfriends showed up to everything. My family showed up to everything. And so even if it wasn't, you didn't have a big customer base at the beginning, I always had support. So I think authenticity is one, making sure that you're sure with what you're doing, like you believe in what you're doing. And I think I'll tell a little quick story of a time when I first started my business. It's kind of what Babe Sporting Babes came out of. But when I first started, I worked really hard to get my very first brand. And when I got it, a girl that had a business in my building called the brand and said, "Why would you hire her? She's a kid. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's really junior. She's going to like ruin your brand." And really, it really hurt me. Like at the time, I remember being like, I just used my last $300 to like fly to Las Vegas to like secure this brand with the brand manager. But what was the amazing, kind of like outcome of that was the girl that hired me actually happened to be the same age as me, and she was also building her career. And so basically she said to the girl, like, "How did you get my number? Do you understand that we're both building our careers to get together? Like, I don't do business like this." And I remember thinking in that moment, had she chosen to move away from me, that wouldn't have been a business partnership that I would have wanted. And I think that's something that's really important as anybody goes and starts a business. Don't just go for the first opportunity. And also, I remember the retaliation after, like thinking about what I would say. And I remember thinking, well, if I respond negatively, then I'll be just like that. And so instead, I chose to respond in a way that I just carried on doing my own thing. And I think that that's also another like piece of advice that I could share was, there's always going to be people that don't think that you should be where you are. And you're always going to feel a little, especially at the beginning, like unsure if you should be. But I think if you're able to like dig deep into your core and think about like what truly matters to you. And for me, it was how I made people feel and keeping my authentic relationships. And I was like, I don't want to be like that because that hurt me. So I didn't, and it all worked out. And so I think that that was like so after that came the Babe Sporting Babes kind of initiative, I guess.
Amazing. And I think what really rings, loud and clear for me is integrity as well. Like that's a huge, word and feeling, and something that you really have to abide by and have integrity in everything that you do. In saying that, it kind of tethers into my next question for you. So our mission statement at Oxygen Yoga is, "I love my life."
Yeah.
And I truly have, we use that to create a channel for people to go and release their energy and meet people and build a community. And all in all, that encompasses, "I love my life." What is your mission statement, and how do you weave that into what you do within your business model?
You talking my professional mission statement or my personal? Professional, like
Well, let's talk about both, because I think
they're
that's
actually
interesting.
probably the same thing. But our vision statement at Brunette The Label is uplift all babes all day or day. It's literally so simple. And we have 4 like key points for us. One of them is assume positive intent. So that's assuming that everybody around you is doing their best and you're just there to make life better for them instead of it being about you. Turn around and make it about supporting others. That's like kind of one of our strongest values within the company. Again, like I said earlier, how we make people feel is the most important thing. I think it's like a lot about intention. So Brunette The Label is a lot about intentions, but because Brunette The Label is kind of me, those are sort of my values. I think personally, I also think a lot about like the bigger like picture, kind of believing in a little bit bigger than yourself and creating your own life. Like I believe that there, you know, I know everybody comes from different backgrounds and not everybody is in a privileged place as us. So I know it's hard to create opportunities for yourself in some situations, but I believe that you can create the life that you want by like I don't know, choosing happiness and trying your best to give. I think you get what you give. And so I think if you're really like kind of all about yourself, it's really hard to grow. I think if you could just be more about like a community, that sort of like my values is like all about sort of like community working together. There's room enough for everybody, supporting people that you can help get to where they want to go and not being scared that they're going to kind of take from you. Those are sort of my personal
Yes, I fully agree. Collaborating, working together, networking, and everybody's, you know, minds working together to create a bigger, better outcome
yeah,
is
exactly.
one of my philosophies as well.
I can
So,
tell you are all about it.
oh, thank
And
you.
integrity as well.
Yes, thanks. So would you consider yourself a visionary person? And if so, I think you might be. What do you do, and what type of practice do you have in order to create reality with something you visualize?
So I'm big into manifestation, huge into it. It started happening in my life. I'm very like open person. There isn't much I don't share. So I think it gives space for stuff to flow back to me. It's like kind of this like cyclical thing. But probably like 5 years ago, I started noticing a lot of like manifestation around me. I would write things down. For example, Juicy Couture was a collaboration I always wanted to have. When I first bought my very first tracksuit, it was like such a big deal to me. And I read the book of the
Was it
founder.
velvet? Was
Yeah,
it
it was
velvet crust?
pink velour.
The
That's
same one.
why I
Well,
made a pink
the
velour
crushed
tracksuit in
velvet.
the collection. That's why, because I honestly couldn't afford it, and it was like I wore it every day, and it was hilarious. But I'm really that it kind of started showing itself to me. Just in ways like I was like, God, it'd be so cool to do a collaboration with Juicy Couture, and I like wrote it down. And we were in Las Vegas at a trade show, and the next day owner the company that owns Juicy's son, who works for the company, walked in the booth.
Wow.
And that happened like 5 times kind of during that show. I love cell phone cases. I'm very passionate about cell phone cases. I don't know why. I was like, I just want to make cell phone cases, right? Wrote it down. Next person that walked in the booth that same day was like, hi, I make manufacture cell phone cases. I'm like, this is crazy. I feel like it was a little bit of a sign. But there was also a lot of hard work. I think like you can't just be like, I want to win the lottery and it happens. Like there has to be action, in my opinion, behind it. And so you know, for that founder or the Juicy Couture had a brand development, for him to have walked in our booth. My brand manager, he's actually our creative director or art director, sorry, Ryan Pugsley, who's worked at the company for almost as long as I have been there, got in his car and drove to LA the day before the show because we couldn't get a hold of the guy that made our neon sign. And instead of just being like, oh, the neon sign isn't coming, he literally got in the car, drove like 24 hours, found the guy, put the sign in the car, drove to Vegas. We met him in Vegas. And the reason that the owner of Juicy's son, or the brand development, I'm not speaking English right now, the brand development developer of Juicy came in because he liked the sign. So there is a lot more to it. Like I think it's like I believe in manifestation, but I think like intention, work ethic has to come along with that. So that's something I practice a lot. I also will, because I ride, in my opinion, riding is like a form of meditation because you can only think about that. You can't think about anything else, which is kind of dangerous. So that's one of the reasons. But the connection with the animal, the kind of spirituality that goes along with that, on top of the fact that like your focus has to be 100% on that for like safety, and you just can't be thinking of anything else. Feel that creates like open spaces for me to then think. You need clearings to think.
Yep, no, I agree. And I think having that separation, because I mean, as an entrepreneur, we both know that mind goes constantly. I mean, I carry my notepad around with me, because if I don't write it down, sometimes it goes. And I'm all about writing down my to-do list, and crossing things off is like a hurrah moment for me. It's
Oh
just,
yeah.
it's like that sense of accomplishment, right? And it sounds really old school, old
Oh,
fashioned,
no.
but it works.
I have one, I take it everywhere. And even sometimes I'll be like, oh, I need to do that. And then I do it, but then I write it down and I cross it off because it makes me feel better.
I agree. And it's funny because I mean, a lot of my friends, use the notes and what have you, like within their phone. To me, I don't know. I need to
Yeah.
physically write it down, and that physical crossing it off is that element of satisfaction, to look at what have I accomplished in my day,
Totally.
right? Which is I think really wonderful.
Yeah, me too.
So actually, it's kind of interesting you talking about relationships and fate and stuff, and uh, how we met. I
Yeah.
think was amazing, and I'm going to open the floor up to you introducing how we met, and then
Okay.
what's become.
Okay. So probably it would have been 2016, maybe. I was 2 years into my business. We had started making blonde and brunette sweatshirts, and we obviously mostly everything I make, I just make sure that it wasn't made before. And so it's kind of crazy to think that we do have trademark on that. There was nothing in the market at that point that had blonde and brunette on clothing. And so I just started, and obviously pretty like vulnerable situation or experience when you first start a business, and there's not many people that work in your team, and it was just me and a couple people. And somebody called us and told us there was I can say the whole story, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yoga studio that had brunette sweatshirts. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. We must have sold it to them. And then I realized that we had not, and that somebody had printed the exact same brunette font on a black sweatshirt, which looked identical. And one of the things that's really hard, I actually have like a very peaceful feeling about trademark stuff, because I personally believe that mostly people don't know. And I never get really upset. I always with my lawyer, I'm like, I'd like to call first. I actually developed some beautiful friendships out of this by just telling people the experience. And so I think I called the studio, and they had basically were like, well, it's you don't our trademark hadn't gone through yet. And they were basically like, you don't have a trademark, like it is what it is. And then you and I spoke, and you were so beautiful and kind, and I explained the situation, and you listened, and you were like, I absolutely agree, we shouldn't have it. And you supported me, and it was all very positive. It was never negative experience at all with anybody, but it was just that you as a female entrepreneur were like, or as an entrepreneur, not even just as a person, you supported me, and you were like, I don't want to be a business that doesn't support growing entrepreneurs. And so you had it taken down and taken away, and totally supported me. And then we developed a friendship, and it was just, that's how I believe, what I personally believe when these things happen. Always my intention is that that's going to be the response, and it isn't always, but it can be. And I just think it goes to show that things don't, there is hard situations that occur where people don't intend to do things that are harmful to others, but it's all about how it's handled, and how and sort of the outcome of it, both for me going into it and for you kind of listening to me, because at that point my business wasn't big yet, and you didn't have to, like, you honestly didn't. I mean, if we wanted to, we could have fought it, but we didn't ever think to even get there. And I think that just goes to show what kind of person you are, and also with your integrity. And then, like, thinking back now, that's like 4 or 5 years, almost 5 years later, and we're sitting here having a beautiful conversation and about to talk about something fun that we're doing together.
Well, and honestly, that the way I look at it, I mean, obviously there's businesses that have tried to use oxygen as well, and I take it as a compliment,
Yeah.
right? And as you had indicated, sometimes people were unaware, and I believe they were unaware, and they took it as like, that's a great idea, and it was a great idea, and it is a great idea, and obviously it's still flourishing. And I just think us coming back and just understanding each other's needs, and then, I mean, now we've got some things that are unrolling that we're not ready to quite unveil, but I
But
am
exciting.
super excited about our collaboration and things moving forward, because there's going to be a lot of exciting things to come with both of our businesses
Yeah.
collaborating and working together. And I think all in all, we both come from that same idea of just supporting other, entrepreneurs, and I really want to say women, and really just giving them the courage, the strength to take those first couple steps, because it's scary.
Oh, yeah.
And it's scary because we're all afraid of failure. And I love to say this because I love to fail, because every time I fail,
You get
I
better.
get I choose to learn from it.
Yeah.
If I choose to wallow in the failure, well, I'm never going to grow. I'm never going to, get past that failure piece. But whenever I fail, I get to learn. And when I get to learn, I get to share it with other people like yourself, or, my other colleagues, my children. And it really, all in all, it's about sharing and growing and just being able to be open to listening and just really love what you do.
Totally.
And
Choosing the life that you want to lead, you
yeah,
making sure. And it, when you have failure, it's like acknowledging that it's painful and feeling that pain and like understanding that it is hard and then moving on. I think it's like, that's the part that's important, making sure you feel all the feels on the way through. But if you never start, you're never going to know. And I'm such a believer, like one of my biggest pieces of business advice to anyone is always like, just do it. Just make the step. You don't exactly have to have the craziest, it's probably not the best like business advice because, but I'm like, you don't have to have your full business plan and financials and all of that stuff that they teach you in business school. You just need to have a plan. You need to have a value system, and you need to make sure it's authentic, and then you need to take one step.
that's awesome. And it's so true. One of my journals actually says, just a girl who decided to go for it. And
Mhm.
it's true. It's like, and my one thing of talking about being, a visual person, if you can visualize something, you're already there. You
Yeah.
just need to find out the steps and how to get there, and who to bring onto your team in order to
Yeah.
support you to allow that to happen.
Yeah, I'm
So
always,
if
I
you
don't want to hire a bunch of me's. I need you guys. Like, I need to hire a bunch of other like brains, and I needed help. Like, we don't know how to do everything. It's like a learning
yeah,
curve as we go, and making sure that you bring in the people that can support you. For me, it's like I remember I switched my hiring to always hire people. It's not always about the experience for me. It's way more about the kind of person it is. Like,
mhm.
again, I'll share our value systems with them, and if they're on board, then and I can usually feel it like intuitively, like energies. But every time I've thought to hire somebody that I just didn't think was aligned with my values, it never worked.
I agree. The core values is
Yeah.
extremely important to have that alignment. And you can mold the business and ideas and, systems and concepts all around that. But if you don't have that internal core value and that alignment,
Mhm.
then that's something that you can't teach somebody. That's
Yeah.
just something that's within, right? And that's truly important. So just going back to that element of fear and hurdles, was there ever a point where you had to, you had to put a hard stop on something? Or, I mean, other than COVID, but
Yeah.
I mean, has there ever been a time where you just kind of were at a point of just feeling maybe defeated? And what, if that was the case, what gave you the that push to persevere and keep going?
Well, for sure, all the time. I mean, COVID, when it first happened, probably same for everybody, that was almost debilitating. Like, I'm pretty quick at turning or things around, and that took me a few days to be like, what are we gonna do? I remember speaking with my dad and him being like, what are you gonna do? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, well, hope isn't a plan, sweetheart. You need a plan. I was like, right, I need a plan. And then individually, my team. So one of the things that I would say that's helped me overcome a lot of stress is my team. I feel like there was periods of my time as an entrepreneur where I felt really isolated and alone. When you are kind of like the CEO and founder of the business on your own, I'm sure you can understand. It's like kind of can be a nice, super isolating feeling. And I feel in the last like 5 years, my team has become like way more interactive. And I would say feeling like not alone. That would be one thing, like letting people in, showing your vulnerability without feeling like, I'm a leader of a team. I think again, I was like, what do I want out of this? I was like, I want to keep my employees employed. I want to support my customers. So the moment I was able to go back to our values, I was able to come up with a plan. So that's why I keep reiterating this sort of value system, because then they know how to deal with things without going to you. So it actually creates way less stress for you, because they're like, well, how would she want us to deal with it? If you are very clear on that, I think that's helpful. But there's for sure been periods of time, like I remember financially, there was, I think it was year 4 was really hard for me, and then year 7. And I remember I had to pay like a huge bill for inventory, and I was away in Spain for a sales meeting, and they had messed up the accounts people for the other company messed something up for me, and they screwed up and told me that I owed like a huge amount more than they thought. And I actually had a panic attack, which I've never had before. And I didn't know what it felt like. I thought I was actually having a heart attack. It was so scary. And I remember being like, you will be fine. Like it's just overcoming and going through that type of thing, and just being like, even if I have to like work so hard to just like figure this out, I know that I can work hard enough to fix it. That would be one thing. And two, like, it's not going to kill you. It's like, you just have to kind of try to like release the stress part of it. But I'd say financial and inventory management have been two things for me that have almost the highest learning curve for me. I never received any funding when I started Brunette. So I started Brunette with $5,000 and then another $5,000. And that was the only loan I took until 3 years ago.
Good for you.
Yeah. So, and I never had an investor. Like I literally was slow and steady runs the race, and a lot of pressure on me. So I feel like it taught me a lot, taught me to manage my stress, and also like capabilities, like what I was capable of doing. But I think, yeah, the inventory management, the financial management aspects were two things that I had no experience in at all. And that was probably the highest learning curve and the biggest stress. And you just kind of have to look and go back. And if it meant slowing down for a bit so I could figure out how to do it, that's what I did. But I think understanding that you can move through just about anything.
Yeah, I was in a similar situation as well. Like I started everything just completely funded by myself. I'm kind of one of those old school thinkers. If you don't have, that right now, then you don't move forward, right? So similar circumstances for myself. And I mean, obviously COVID and everything has turned, and there's been a lot of pivoting and a lot of actions taken with respect to different ways of creating revenue streams with our on-demand platforms and just many other alternative solutions. But it is allowing yourself to be creative, and we could all get stuck in this dark hole that doesn't seem to be going anywhere, or we can choose to look at a solution as to what is going on. And I tend to really gravitate towards solution-based thinking as opposed to, because focusing on the problem, yes, we have to identify that there are problems, although with every problem, there's a solution. So if we could shift that thinking to be more proactive on thinking, with respect to solutions, I think, we'd be in much better situation. So that's one thing that I've learned. I knew that about myself, but I think throughout this past year, I've really identified, and it does resonate with me on being a solution-based thinker and being proactive with our actions.
And it's also understanding that doesn't mean it's less hard, and it doesn't mean it's less stressful. Doesn't mean that you don't feel all the feelings that everyone feels. It's just trying to move forward. And I do think when you have like something that's meaningful to you, I'm sure you have a million, I can't wait to like hear more about the things that are like really special to you within what you are doing. But I think that when you have that, you kind of have a why. like for me, I'm like, I just want to help my customers. Like, even if we just make through like these 3 months when March happened, I just was like, how do I do that? And we set up like, my husband and myself took all the inventory out of our secondary warehouse, threw it into a giant U-Haul, brought it to my retail store and set up like a warehouse so that we could offer free shipping to all of our customers, and canceled all their wholesale orders. Like, it was really scary for me, but my goal was to support them. So I think the why is really important.
Exactly. And I think that's very important that you say that, because when you're questioning, what am I doing? Always bringing yourself back to that why
Yeah.
will allow you to, to have those feelings resonate within yourself
Yeah.
again. If you are truly doing what you love doing, and you can bring yourself back to that initial place when you first started your business, and you saw something, and and when you can circle back and relive those feelings, it's really, really important. And I think it's solid being able to do that.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm gonna ask you one last question here, because I
Okay.
know you're really, really busy, and I just want to say thank you for your time. I want your one big celebration aha moment. It could be personally, it could be within your, well, actually, I want to know both.
Okay.
Personally, and then in your career. What would those two big aha celebration moments be to inspire all of those people listening to you right now?
Like, aha, as in from darkness to light, like coming out of like hard stuff. Is that what you mean? Or like moment?
Yeah, or just something that you, maybe if you're feeling like that, you need to be motivated. That one celebration piece that you continue to bring yourself back to, that reinvigorates yourself, that gives you that pep in your step, that
Well,
glow.
that's an interesting question. I'd say personally, I remember coming out of like a really, really dark time in my life, kind of like my mid 20s, was quite hard for me. And I remember one day, I remember being like, I don't feel like I'm ever gonna, I just was like unmotivated. I had lost passions and I didn't really know what I liked anymore. I had like a very young relationship that didn't go the way I wanted it to. And I remember at that age being like, I want to get married and have kids. I was really young and so different from where I'm at right now. And I remember sitting in this moment being like, this isn't my life. I know this isn't my life. And I literally left and I started from scratch. And I was not that young when when I had chosen to do that. And I remember thinking like, I would rather kind of like start from the bottom and build the life I want than like live a life that made me unhappy. And so I left. I moved in with my parents, and I moved in actually into the downtown east side into like apartment building, and kind of built my life from there. I started working in fashion, and then kind of evolved. But it would have been really easy for me to stay stagnant where I was. And I chose not to. But what was really special is I remember walking down the seawall probably like 5 years later. And I remember being like, I don't ever remember it looking so pretty. And I was looking
Hmm.
around and the boats were like sparkling and the water was sparkling, and just this like weight lifted from me. It was like I went through the darkness to find light. And I think that for me personally, realizing that there's always going to be hard times and there's always going to be dark times, but like knowing that the world is balanced and with darkness is light, and like trying to look for the lightness or for the light, or knowing that it's not that far away, was something that was like personally for me, it was looking around and being like, I don't remember it looking like this. I hadn't seen it that way before.
Amazing.
So
That's
personally, that's
beautiful.
it. Probably professionally, it would have been like, I think about the moment I walked out of Nordstrom for the first time, head office, and I felt like I was in The Devil Wears Prada. That was like a moment. Or when we announced our Juicy collaboration at Fashion Week and had a big party. But mostly it's like the little moments when I'm at the office and I look around and I see like the little departments like working together. They don't need me anymore. They have their own kind of like roles. They created their own, mostly everyone in my company has created their own roles because they didn't exist before. So just kind of looking around and watching the like dynamic, the positive, like healthy environment that I personally feel has been created within Brunette headquarters, and being like, holy, this is really important for like I mostly have women, but young people to work in an environment where they can be self-motivated and like celebrated for being themselves. I feel like that's probably the thing that keeps me going the most.
Amazing. I love it. I love the idea of just the openness and the communication and everybody learning off one another. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
And thank you, and exciting things to come.
Yeah.
And stay tuned.
And so next time we're on here, we'll be announcing it maybe.
I think we will be. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well,
Okay, you have a great day. Thanks for joining. Okay,
we'll talk
bye.
later. Bye.
Yeah.